This week on A to Z Running, we look at the role muscle strength plays in longevity.
In the world of running, records continue to drop like lead weights.
The U.S. Indoor Championships introduced some fresh faces.
And can you guess the last time a half marathon record was broken by this much?
All this and more on A to Z Running. Welcome back to A to Z Running, where we help runners thrive with information, inspiration, and coaching services. I'm Andy.
And I'm Zach. You can find out everything you need to know at AtoZrunning.com and find us on Instagram, Spotify, and YouTube. Just look for A to Z Running. We'll be there sharing things. Andy's great at sharing things. She's getting cleverer and cleverer with ways to share content, but also trying to find more and more ways to make it practical and accessible to you. And so you can always find the latest from A to Z Running in those places. And we did share a recent article via our email digest. Again, I told you we would be doing this. It's not with any kind of sure regularity on purpose, by design. We're not trying to flood your inbox with messages. But every once in a while, we want to share some interesting tidbits. And this one was about broccoli and other things. But the study was particularly fascinating. So those who had a chance to look at not just our email, but the study we were linking to, this exercise science group in Sweden was looking at the effects of broccoli on performance for runners. And you should understand that this is not by any means a novel idea. Broccoli, in particular, antioxidative products like broccoli and other types of nutrition or nutritional sources, those things have been proven to be valuable for lowering oxidative stress, and yet have not been thoroughly studied in an exercise science context for some reason. I don't know why. So they took broccoli shots, like a nutritional supplement version of broccoli. So it's like highly concentrated, lots and lots of broccoli, and basically nothing else. I think they said there was a little sugar added for flavor, but the guy who was trying it was like, "Oh, it's bad." It's funny. And they took broccoli shots 3 hours before exercise, and they found pretty conclusively, as you would expect them to, because it's antioxidative, they found that it helps buffer against lactate buildup when you're running at lactic threshold. As a matter of fact, it could be significant, like over 10%. And that's kind of funny.
It is, yeah.
But it's also not surprising. We've known things. That's why other types of antioxidative products have found their way into exercise science.
So I'm interested in how they're going to create sports food that includes broccoli, because broccoli is fibrous. And so if you were to eat it, they did shots, but if you were to eat it straight up, raw broccoli, it might cause some digestive issues for running hard. So I don't know. 3 hours before, though, is a significant amount of time before. But if it was right before, I think there would be some problems.
You'd also probably need quite a bit of raw broccoli to account for the amount of broccoli than in their pureed shots.
Yeah.
So you're probably better to make yourself some kind of super smoothie that's broccoli based.
That's a good thought.
Throw some spinach and kale in there, because I guess those are good things. I don't know. Grass.
Not too much fiber, guys. Not too much fiber.
Yeah, don't do that. But their point was it is known to cause GI distress. And at the same time, with the way that they were consuming the broccoli, it did not seem to be a major factor or concern. Mm-hmm. Now, everyone's going to say, well, okay, if you can have 10% improvement on performance just from taking broccoli shots, then why isn't everyone doing that? Well, the answer is they're probably already doing things like that, just not necessarily broccoli. Because again, antioxidant supplementation is a common phenomenon in exercise in the form of nutrition and various other nutritional elements. So no, I don't think this was a novel experience, but the study was more of a novel context for
It's
broccoli.
interesting.
It was cool.
Regardless.
Now, if you want to know more about that topic, you have to be an email subscriber so you get the full extent of what we talk about in those kinds of article reviews. And we're just going to tease you on air so that you do so. And all of these things you can learn at AtoZrunning.com. Now, before we get into the heart of our content for today's episode, we did want to give an update. And I know in part because so many of you have reached out to us. Thank you for your kind words. Yes, Zach had a crazy experience a couple of weeks ago, and we shared it on air. I'm not going to relive it again for you all here right now, but I can tell you I met with the great orthopedic surgeon who was a guest on our show a number of times, Dr. John Maskell. I met with him to review the situation and found out, to my great relief, that the types of fractures, plural, that I have in my foot, there are 2 of them, by the way, the types of fractures in my foot are not the kinds of fractures that are of structural concern. And I can't remember the name of them. There's a certain word for these kinds of fractures. And so instead, what it is it's something that it's going to take some time to heal. It's probably going to be painful while it's healing, and yet I could still do normal activity. I also have an ankle sprain, so I can't actually do normal activity quite yet. But if let's just go down the list. If Dr. John Maskell is setting me straight on what the nature of my injury is, shout out to him, and Adam Homolka at Endurance Rehab is going to be treating me. We're setting up appointments and such, getting that ready. So going to be seeing Adam. So shout out to Endurance Rehab and the physical therapy group that is the greatest for runners in the area. And in addition to all of that, we also want to speed along the recovery process in such ways that we're able to, and ortho laser happens to be our choice for that as well. And so I'm getting lasered in the particular soft tissues of concern. Laser is not proven or known to be effective for bone repair, but soft tissue definitely. And it has proven to be that for me, certainly. And so I'm doing that also. So you can see we're going through the motions quite a bit right now to try to get well and back into a confident state of running capacity, such as it would be possible if it is. So there you have it. And if you don't know the story about what happened, you got to go back and listen to the previous episode, the one right before this one, because it was crazy. I guess I didn't really tell the whole story either, did I?
No, you didn't. But
I just intimated, but there's enough of an intimation so that you get the story. Okay.
I don't really have much to update you on. Just chugging along, doing little tiny runs and run walks, and feeling okay still. I feel like there's forward motion, and that's all really good. And I want to reiterate and echo Zach's thanks for those of you who have reached out. It really does mean a lot to us to hear from you and to have you care. So thank you.
Right on. Well, with that, speaking of ways to be better in more than one domain and dimension, we are going to talk a little bit about longevity and the role that strength plays in that capacity. That's next. I feel like some background on this topic is necessary because this didn't come out of nowhere, but it's going to kind of seem like it came out of nowhere. First, some time ago, if you recall, we were challenging the search engines to a contest of what question can be answered best by the search engine. And so we would Google things and then see what it would say. And one of those questions had to do with aging. Do you recall when we did that? We said, what are the effects of aging on running performance and something like that. And what we found consistently across all of the different sources were responses that essentially could be summarized as your body declines in terms of its cellular level capacities, which includes cellular metabolism, and so your aerobic capacity goes down from the cellular perspective, as well as your muscle mass decreases as you age. And so we know these things to be true in a general sense. But at the same time, for quite a while, a coworker of mine has been talking about this researcher who has written a book about the topic of longevity and what happens to us as we're aging, and what kinds of things, what kinds of patterns of behavior, like nutritional things, like physical activity things, like sleep and hydration, any patterns of behavior, what effects do those positive patterns of behavior have on longevity, and what can we know about that and therefore do to have a healthier, longer life? So, as you might expect, that's an important thing in general. We like to think about how can we live well and be healthy. But runners in particular have an interest in the topic because we so often, as we discuss our sport, have essentially three primary goals that arise in conversation. One is performance. Like I want to run fast and run my best, win this race, or qualify for this thing, or that kind of stuff. We have performance goals. Another is enjoyment. Like I want to do this thing because I like it, because it's fun, and all that kind of stuff. Or I want to have fun and do this thing. So that's a good one. And then the other one is some kind of like health, wellness / longevity. Like I want to do this thing forever, as long as my body can handle it. I do this because it's healthy for me, or because being fit is a good thing in and of itself. It is a good end, and therefore I want to do it. As it were, that third motivation becomes more and more the centerpiece for almost every runner as we age. And that's in part because the enjoyment piece starts to just become par for the course. For most runners who've been running for many, many years and continue to do so, it's I could say it's almost taken for granted. I do enjoy it. It's not really a focal point. I just do. Not to say that that's true for everybody all the time. There are moments, right? There are moments. What's a moment when you don't enjoy running as much as others, Sandy?
Oh, just when you feel like crud.
Yeah, just thinking about that. Not every day feels great. In the middle of January when it's dark in the Midwest, and there are moments. But in principle, so we know that performance declines. Fundamentally, performance is going to decline after a certain age and will only decline in some form or fashion over time. And yet, the desire for health and wellness that comes from our running endeavors increases. It becomes more important because other goals are decreasing or not as central. And so to me, that's like, okay, this is paramount then to understand as a runner, as a person, generally, what are the things that I need to make sure I am doing because they're going to help me sustain this thing. They're going to help me achieve that goal of lifelong or many years of running and such. So that brought us to today's topic, because it happens to combine a number of these background things that have been on our minds. So there are two layers here that we want to try to address. The first is that the physical activity that we might do is not just about fitness, but it is also about how it helps us endure. And so longevity as a piece of that, but not just living longer, but living healthier for a longer period of time.
Being able to do more things. Maybe your goal is to be able to play with your grandkids. Maybe your goal is to be able to go on that great trip that you've been looking forward to and be able to hike. There are a lot of motivations for quality of life and having aspirations that your physical wellness can help carry you to.
True that. So we're going to spend a few minutes here being morose, because we're going to talk about the top 10 causes of death for those 65 and older, and particularly why those, because of what happens in the trend lines. So you're going to be familiar with a list. I'm not going to read out the list, but you're going to be familiar with a list like this because it's a well-known thing. And you hear it like it's in the commercials on TV, right, about the medicines. It's in the commentary that you see about why is heart healthy cereal something that matters? Well, it actually happens to be something that comes up. So this list is straightforward. Things like number one, the number one killer of 65 and older in the United States is heart disease or heart condition or heart failure. And so your heart is very important. And it happens to be true that an active lifestyle leads to a healthier heart, fundamentally. Yeah. And so we can start
heart
talking
health.
about, right. And there are other things, obviously. But just as it were, heart as a source of death has been declining in the last 20 years, which is a good thing. Likewise, cancer, which is another leading cause of death, for 65 and older has been declining in the last 20, 25 years. And that's not surprising because medical advancements, because of awareness in general. So we understand certain things are not good for us in these kinds of big categories, and we can do things to avoid them, not just in the moment of concern, like the doctor says, your heart's in bad shape, you need to make a change, but like when you're 30 years old and you've been told your whole life growing up that heart healthy cereal and heart healthy foods, right? So we have this capacity to now live in a way that tends toward better health in some of these big categories because they've been such a focal point. But what exposes, or what is exposed then in these studies, in particular the CDC's review of causes of death, which is where this particular one comes from that we're using. It happens to be true that as those kinds of things decline and as we understand them better and know how to address them better, some of the things that we don't understand still as well are increasing. And that has a lot to do with your mind. So like dementia, Alzheimer's, and some other mind-related conditions. And so those causes of death have now been increasing in the last 20 to 25 years. But what's important to understand at the moment here is that in terms of the top 10 list, almost everything else on the top 10 list has been declining in the last 20 years, except Alzheimer's and mind conditions. And this one's going to make people pause. The other one that's been increasing, not just increasing, but has more than doubled in the last 20 to 25 years, is deaths caused by accidents, in particular, falling. Falling as a cause of death in those 65 and older has more than doubled in the last 20 years. And I just mentioned all the reasons why it makes sense that heart and cancer and some of those things have been declining. It likewise makes no sense why falling has been increasing, because that's something we have been aware of for many, many years, as far as like being healthy physically is important in general. Well, we're going to talk about that for a few minutes. The guy who did the research behind that longevity book particularly makes the claim that he feels the number one thing that we could do to all but erase that concern as a cause of death is strength work. And he doesn't talk about that at a certain moment in time. He's talking about lifelong, regular habits of strength work. And in principle, I think that starts to make sense. But what you find is that the two things that are the most likely cause for these kinds of accidents is poor balance, which is stability strength, by the way, and then poor muscle mass, broad general muscle mass, like just overall weakness.
Another part of that, though, is your actual bone strength. And loading is helpful in that, doing strength work, but also running helps build your bones. Having higher bone density is going to help and reduce the likelihood of death by falling too.
True that. So this then raises a question like, so what should we do? What should we do? It seems kind of obvious. The answer is built into the question. We need to be stronger. What should we do? Get stronger. Well, we find in all of the research, without fail, that two of the most important things that you can do to be healthier longer are general aerobic cardiovascular exercise and strength training. And not like, hit the weight room raw and just power through mega lifts, but just like general strength training. And what starts to become evident, I think that's important to reflect on here, is that those things don't just address this small cause of death of falling, but in particular, they find that these kinds of things have effects on, of course, central systems like your heart and your lungs and such, but also on your brain and the health that comes from. Now, again, I say we don't fully understand still as a community of the science around and the common understandings around these things. They don't still fully understand what can and cannot be done about things like dementia and Alzheimer's in terms of lifestyle. But there's no doubt at all that there's a correlation between active exercise lifestyle and healthier bodies, healthier brains. and other kinds of things like healthier emotional states too. But we now see that the case can be made for in all things that these are good things, and runners already having the propensity to want to do these types of things have an advantage, but yet also have a detriment, because as I know you're saying in your head right now, we are all guilty of the cardinal sin of general strength, which is, I don't have time for that. Like, I don't like that. I can't do that. It isn't as directly associated with my goals, so it's not important. Or it's not that much fun. I love running. I really don't like getting out the exercise bands or the dumbbells.
Are you quoting me?
Yes. It isn't as social. And so, like, my exercise time is my social time. That's how I can justify that, with everything else that's busy in my life. But then when I have to just go into my basement and get out the weights, it's not really the same. Or how about this one? I don't know what to do. I have the equipment. I spent all the money on the stuff from all the commercials, but I don't really know what to do with it. And when I sit down there and I stare at it, I think, okay, I actually kind of know what to do with it, but it takes a lot of mental energy to figure out what to do each time in specifics. And
so not having a routine.
That's kind of it. So I just gave all of Andy's reasons. How about anyone else? And mine too. I am no better. I'm no better than anybody else. And I should say that it is a legitimate, like, I don't know what to do, or I don't have time to do it, and I don't have time to figure out what to do. That's a legitimate thing.
He's not minimizing it. He's just saying collectively that is something that runners struggle with, and all people do, because we are all time poor. And so, yeah. But I do think partially the routine paired with not knowing what to do, but also overloading on days and making it an unmanageable experience. So like having days where you like are in the weight room for a long time and you feel like that's what you have to do to be successful, instead of having it be a more manageable chunk of time that you're being consistent at. It's hard to have consistency when you have long routines.
It's true. It's true. I will grant you that excuse one time. But then you can't use it again. And so the next time you realize you're not doing your strength work generally, you no longer have an excuse. So the answer to the, I don't know what to do, well, there's some good reason for that in general, because the strength side of the information age is so overcrowded, it's absurd. You can find 1,000 people who tell you that you are doing your lunges incorrectly. And then each one of them will show you a different way to do it that they say is the right way. And so now the question becomes, how do I figure this out? Like, what? And then on Instagram, for instance, and I don't know this personally because I don't actually have Instagram, but my physical therapist, Adam Homolka, often refers to other Instagrammers that he goes to try to find examples of different kinds of exercises if he doesn't have a good one on hand himself.
Because there's so many videos online.
Because there's so many, right? But he has said so many times that there's just too much out there. And so like he has 2 or 3 different particular people that he has found to really know their stuff. And those are the people he goes to. But you can go out and search pigeon squat stretch or whatever that thing's called, and they're not all going to be the same thing. And then you have to figure out which one I actually do. So I understand that point, and I grant you that. It is true. And it's also true that a lot of the people who claim that this is on the YouTube ads, who claim that everything you thought you knew was wrong, chances are they're also wrong in some sense. And it's not because there aren't good ideas out there and those people are sharing them. It's because your particular context is not always the one they're pointing toward. Mm-hmm. So if you are a runner who's trying to do strength work for, let's say, you're trying to run a 5K and you're 25 years old and you're really just trying to get as lightning fast as you possibly can, what you should do is different than if you're 65 years old and you're a marathoner and you're trying to do strength work because your body needs to stay stable and coordinated well. Those are 2 different answers as far as what's best.
And like my sister, she just had a baby not that long ago, and she is doing strength for postpartum.
Exactly.
So it's a different thing than she would have been doing when she was training for her Ironman a few years ago.
And then you go into your physical therapist's office, like Adam's at Endurance Rehab, and you say, what's wrong with me and what should I do? And he's going to be able to diagnose your specific areas of weakness and say, you actually should be spending less time doing that kind of exercise and more time doing this kind, because that's what your body needs in particular. So this is why it is true when we say, oh my goodness, there's too much and I don't really know what I should be doing, and I'm now just paralyzed by plethralic paralysis.
Pinterest. Actually, he meant to say Pinterest, where you pin all the things you are going to do, but you don't actually do them.
See, I never understood Pinterest for that very reason. It's like Pinterest is like a junk drawer, right? People don't ever get things out of junk drawers. They only put them in because they say to themselves, that I can just put in the junk drawer and I'll deal with it later. And later never comes. So anyway, I never grasped Pinterest as a concept.
This will relate, but let me just share this about Pinterest, because I think it's funny how it can translate. So Pinterest, if you go on there and you're just scrolling, oftentimes you put things in folders and you never look at them again. However, if you use Pinterest and you go in with intention, like I'm teaching my children about the layers of the earth, what are some things I can do, and I'm going to do that thing today. And then I seek that information because it's very specific and I understand what I want and what I need. Then I'm able to get it and then use it. Same goes with if you're going to be using stuff that you see online. I think it's very important for you to know and have intention and understand what you need and then choose to implement it as soon as possible so that you don't lose it.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's talk about what the things are that are going to help you figure out what you need to do. And then we're going to tell you what to do. It's just that simple. We're going to tell you what to do because it's actually not that hard to figure this out for ourselves and then make it happen. So I should note that the principal concept here is that without regular strength work, we progressively become less and less capable of generating physiological adaptations. Okay, so you could say to yourself, I'm fine. Running makes me stronger anyway, and I just run on hills a lot, and so I'm good. But keep in mind that the more we neglect these things, the less capable our body is for adapting to the training we're doing. And so we also become less capable of achieving those performance goals we still have, and less able to benefit from future strength work because we're not doing it today. Never forget that what you do now makes you more likely to benefit from what you're doing tomorrow. So don't wait to start doing this stuff. Do it now. And here is the it. Okay. Enter a runner's guide to strength work in a fairly concise and quick explanation, because like I said, this is not a complicated answer. Okay, you have different dynamics when we talk about strength, different purposes. You have literal strength, which is like maximum muscle contraction. How strong are my muscles in terms of the maximum possible force? You have stability and coordination, which coordination technically is neuromuscular. So that's why I say stability is the thing. Stability is the strength of those things that are not the primary contracting muscle group for some kind of movement, but they help make sure that that muscle group is moving the way it should. They're like guide rails, right? That's what stability is. Now, I'm not talking about that as like that's a different kind of strength. It's just a different function within the strength metric here. And then lastly is endurance, which is a different kind of strength. Now that's your muscle tissue's ability to sustain things over time. So now we're talking about repeat muscle contractions and being able to continue to do that over time. That is muscular endurance. Muscular endurance is not the same thing as aerobic endurance. And so this is where we get into all sorts of, I love these conversations, by the way. Cyclists are the best at understanding this difference, better than runners, because the difference between cycling and running fundamentally is the difference between aerobic endurance and muscular endurance. A cyclist needs both, but in particular, a cyclist needs muscular endurance far more than a runner does, because a cyclist can essentially push muscle tissues to near maximum for longer periods of time without as much consequence, because they're able to rest on the bike, and because they're not functionally on a bike, you are pushing the entire time your bike is moving. And so the muscle has to be able to contract with force way more than it does in running, which I love that kind of reflection. There's so many interesting things about that difference. But anyway, so now we ask the question, well, what do you do? Because you need all three of those. That's what we're talking about when we talk about strength. For a runner, you need to increase your muscle contraction potential, your maximum muscle contraction. You need to be more stable, and you need to have muscular endurance. And we can do all three of those very easily, and two of them are even more important than one. So maximum muscle contraction or strength is the least important of the three. And the only reason it's in general for longevity. It is the least important of three. And the only reason for that is because your total output power is not a predictor of things like your muscular endurance. It is not a predictor for things like your potential resilience and some of that kind of stuff. And so it is a good thing to address maximum muscle contraction, especially for the neuromuscular benefit, to produce those wiring signals for your brain to demand that of your muscles is good. But it's not going to make as much of a difference on other kinds of life things. And yet, it's also not that hard to do some things to help with this. For instance, the speed of your muscle contraction, which is a neuromuscular factor, is easy to exercise in terms of like maximum sprinting, right? Where you're just trying to get that muscle contraction happening as high of a level as it can over short bursts. That's a valuable thing for any runner to do. And then in the same kind of sense, you could do something like heavy weight room stuff, and you don't need to do a lot of it. You do a few reps, and so it's like short. You do as heavy as you can tolerate, and so you're not trying to like crush yourself. But then what you do with that is now you're addressing muscle recruitment, and you're trying to increase muscle recruitment, which is valuable. And so when I talk about like weight room types of things, most people are starting to say, oh, then I got to get a super heavy bar and like do a squat, and that's really hard, or a bench press. No, you don't need to do any of that kind of stuff. Just get dumbbells that are fairly heavy so that it's like near what you can tolerate in your hands, right? Your grip strength is going to be the limiting factor with dumbbells more than the actual raw weight of the dumbbell.
For some of us.
Yeah, I guess there are some like climbers who have so much grip strength that it's, their hands will be the last thing to give out. But in general, the idea here being that if you just hold weights and stand still, that it should be difficult. It should not be easy to just hold the weight standing still, so you can't do it for very long. And then do things on one leg at a time. And now you're going to address things like maximum muscle recruitment with single leg, as opposed to having to have so much weight like a bar on your shoulders to do something with two legs. Now, I'm not suggesting that all of us are so strong that we need to have these giant weights to do these things, because you don't. But it is valuable to then address. And so if you don't have any weights at all, what could I do to still address these things? And some types of plyometric stuff are going to be helpful here too, where if you do like single leg types of jumps or hops, then that's going to be something that, for most people, certain plyometric exercises are going to bring you close to maximum muscle contraction. And so there's a lot of options there, but we're not going to spend all that much time on that kind of stuff because it is the least important of the three, though still valuable. Okay. And I should mention here, because this is where everyone starts talking about, you're like bulking up, like am I supposed to build up like huge muscles and everything? That's not what strength actually fundamentally is. Greater muscle mass can produce greater strength over time, certainly, but just addressing maximum muscle contraction does not require significant increases in muscle tissue. It's not something that you can do that without really, quote, bulking up much. So now if you're trying to bulk up, then understand that that's not actually the way to do it. So we'll talk about that one too. All right, now next up is stability. And this is one of the most important things for runners to be doing, because it benefits not only your longevity as a human, but also it helps your running a lot. Because when you are running, you are in a constant state of instability. And so the more your stabilizing muscles are addressed, the better you can perform economically in that state of instability. So here we go. And remember the pairing here. Stability is muscular. Coordination is neuromuscular. So that's like your ability to stand on one leg with your eyes closed and not wobble. That's coordination. But they go hand in hand, because your stabilizing muscles are performing the action. stronger they are, the easier that is to do. But then also the neuromuscular component of being able to hold balance within my awareness of my legs and my position and all that kind of stuff. And so coordination and the control of the different body parts and the things they're supposed to do. Okay, so now what do we do about stability and to address it? And the answer is you just do simple exercises in a destabilized state. So do single leg split squats where you just, put one leg down, put the other leg back behind you on a chair, just so your foot is just laying on top of the chair, and then do a single leg squat like that. And add some weight to it if you want to, or just do it with no weight and do that 10 to 20 time reps. What if you don't have a chair behind you? Well, then just do the classic runner single leg squat where you just move your leg as if you're running, start in front of you as you're up, and then as you squat down, move your leg behind you as if you're running.
I do a few of those before running for recruitment.
It's great.
Single leg runner squats.
Yep. So then anything else, and then add in counterbalanced weight to once you're able to graduate from just flat ground stability. So then instead of doing a single leg split squat with your foot behind you on a chair, hold a dumbbell in your off hand, the hand that's opposite the foot on the ground, and then do the same thing. Now do your single leg motion then. So you destabilize yourself with weight.
Does the mobile board come into play in this section as well?
And then you add in, and that's the next step to graduate further, and you add in a destabilized platform. So you have things like Jay DeSherry's mobile board, which is a phenomenal resource. It's just a piece of wood with some rockers, and you can move the rockers in different positions. Also, it has the added value of focusing your platform on your big toe complex instead of, so your other toes are actually not touching the board. There's like a hole. That's valuable too. But if you don't have access to all of those things, just stand on something like one of those Bosu balls, which they have like everywhere. If you don't have access to a Bosu ball, just stand on something that's really squishy. Like, those mats that you kneel on when you're like weeding flowers in the flower bed. Or in my case, the mats that I kneel on when I'm doing work around the house, like chores, fixing stuff. Stand on one of those. Because they're so thick and squishy, they're slightly less stable than flat ground. And so you can see all of this stuff. Do it barefoot, not with shoes on, because then your stabilizers in your feet are acting even more. And all of this suggests then you can do any number of things here. And this is where we get into, like, there's all this stuff online, right? Just look up single leg exercises and find 5 or 6 of them to do, and that they're not identical, so if there's something a little different, and do those. And it's going to be good. It doesn't really matter exactly what they are. Well, it does. There are some bad ones
and
out
also
there.
doing it properly.
Right, but in principle, you can try to figure out how to do this motion properly, how to do this motion well. The key is, do I know what I'm looking for? I'm looking for destabilized, like single leg types of things. And then there's a whole gamut of plyometric considerations here. Just doing hops on one foot, like just standing there and hopping on one foot 50 times. Maybe not all at once. Do 10 on one, 10 on the other, and go back and forth until you get to 50 each. And then, like Coach Hodgkinson shows in much of his material, hop on one foot while moving slightly forward and slightly backward and slightly to the side and slightly to the other side laterally. And so all of that is the same principle, just applied across contexts. So then you can do that. Do this going up hills where you just do these little skips up the hill. And that's great. Do some other plyometric considerations are like those lunge jumps or squat jumps, or rather split jumps, where you jump from a lunge position, switch into the other lunge position in the air and land. And so all of the principles that we understand about running and functional movement, single leg, destabilized, squat motions, all of that kind of stuff, you can find a collection of a handful of them. You can do that 2 or 3 times a week at most. You don't need to do it more than twice a week, and you're going to be well off. Now, keep in mind those are not the only stabilizers. What else stabilizes us while we're running? Well, core. And you need to have that. And so go look up a good planks routine. And when I say good, I just mean like something that has 6 to 10 exercises in it, and they're not all the same thing again. And so you can then do a routine where you're addressing your abs, your obliques, and your low back. And it's not too hard to find a couple of different ways to do that. If you have an exercise ball lying around, there's a ton of great stuff for exercise ball exercises that help keep it interesting, but also address stabilizing your core. So, and again, remember, destabilized is the key here. And so the same thing we apply with single leg stuff, we do with core exercises. Don't just do an isometric stationary plank. Do
well,
a
you
plank.
can do that and.
Well, you could, but it's by itself is not as valuable as doing the plank while doing single leg lifts. You lift one leg at a time while you're doing it. And if you're going to do a side plank, do it with a hip thrust down and up motion, or a leg lift sideways motion, or bringing your knee to your chest and back down while you're in a side plank. Like, all of these kinds of things force stability into and coordination into your muscles.
That's a good goal to have, but for people who are getting started, it's okay to start simple and be able to build to that, because it might be challenging to do 30 seconds doing a plank. So be okay where you're at, and then know that you can graduate to different motions, and it's all helpful for you. But the leg raises and things of that nature are very beneficial, but you're still doing good work if you are just doing your plank.
Yeah. So stability is a core area of what runners need. And when we talk with a new runner in our programs, one of the first things we talk about is we have a series of exercise routines that are focused around stability, and we would like you to do them. Every day you're doing 10 or 15 minutes worth of something if you're doing the full extent of what you might be able to do as a runner, because you're addressing all of your key areas, your core, your hip complex, and your lower leg complex. And so, yeah, that sounds like a lot to people, right? 10 or 15 minutes is a lot. But first, what if it's just you have a routine that's familiar that you've done so many times, you don't have to think about it. You just wake up in the morning, and as you're getting ready to run, you do that 10 or 15 minute routine, which also happens to get your heart rate up a little bit. So those morning runs are awful when your heart rate is not raised yet, not elevated yet. So that's helpful. And then you can get into your pre-run drills so that you're ready to roll. And you're already going to have to take 20 or 30 minutes after you wake up before you can run. You might as well spend it doing some of this good stuff. So we do have leg strength exercises that we recommend. And we happen to have some routines built in conjunction with Coach Hodgkinson, Adam Homolka, and others. And so there's a lot of good stuff too.
On our YouTube channel, right?
On our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Thank you. I forgot to say where it would be. On YouTube. We have lots of it. We also send them out occasionally to our mailing list. So if you're not on our email list, do that. Okay, and then the last area is endurance. And this is exactly what you might think. It is sustained strength over time. And so these are the kinds of things that you need to exercise muscles to fatigue, or to a degree of fatigue, to really truly achieve what you're trying to achieve when it comes to muscular endurance. This one is not an area that we explicitly recommend runners achieve, because you're already doing it in the running capacity, as far as for what you need most as a runner. However, there are a number of other domains here that we might consider, and upper body is one of them, because you're not doing much with your upper body as a runner. So now this is also the kind of stuff that if you are looking to address the concern of declining muscle mass over time as you age, this is the area that's going to help fend that off the most. And now we just talk about high level contractions repeated over time. And so you take an exercise that is reasonably difficult, and after doing 5 to 10 reps of something, you're not going to really be able to do it anymore. You do that, and you do that repeatedly. And so over the course of a session of exercise, you might do 3 or 4 or 5 different exercises that you will do in rotation, so that you get through 3 sets or so of each. And by the end of it, you're probably going to be a bit sore. But you shouldn't ever be terribly sore, except for the first once or twice that you do it. Your body has to acclimate a bit. You don't want to do this kind of thing so that you're making yourself constantly sore, because that's a little bit overmuch then. However, what kinds of things would you do with this then? And this is the kind of stuff where you could get in a weight room, and you could do stuff in a weight room, or you could just get some resistance bands or some dumbbells and do this at home, and it's not terribly difficult. And so it's like push-ups, right? How many push-ups can you do before it's like, I can't do anymore? Well, the answer is not a lot, unless you do push-ups regularly, because those muscles are not yet strong, as it were, in an endurance capacity. And so we would encourage things in this sense. You could also do plyometric types of things, which are very valuable for runners in general. But you can do other types of stuff now with resistance bands, where it's like, put resistance bands around your knees and then do certain types of hip walks, which are going to fatigue your hips quite rapidly compared to just like a general hip exercise, stability exercise. And so you could do that type of stuff. You can do considerations like single leg work with resistance bands and weights, where that are arm pulls or that are squat types of motions and such. And why single leg? Because it helps with the stability side too. Like, you can combine efforts here. It doesn't all have to be one thing. And so that leads us to then, in terms of implementation, you can do muscular endurance and stability work at the same time. This is not mutually exclusive. You can't really do muscular endurance, stability, and muscular strength all at the same time, because you would want to do something slightly differently with the way you are handling weight to address maximum muscle contraction versus endurance. And so there's a consideration there. But you can take a routine, find a good core routine like a planks routine, and find some exercises within that routine that are particularly challenging, and then do that twice a week. And now you're helping to address the muscular decline that all of us experience, at least after the age of 35, and at the same time, making yourself a better runner.
And that's what we want, right? Longevity, health, to feel good when we're running, to stay as injury-free as possible.
Would anyone like to know the number one recommendation, not from like sports people, but from the longevity people, about an exercise to do to help with this?
Walking
with
weights,
with heavy dumbbells in your hands. As a matter of fact, what they suggest is your own body weight if you're capable.
Okay.
And so that's the maximum. You don't want to do more than your own body weight.
Okay.
But then you walk carrying dumbbells. So you're addressing grip strength, upper body strength to support the dumbbells, and leg strength.
And posture, because you're having to
That's part of what I
stabilize.
meant by upper body strength. Yep. So there you go. If nothing else, walk with dumbbells and you're already on your way to a better, healthier, stronger, longer life. Okay. That's what we wanted to share about that topic. We've got some more interesting things coming your way in future episodes. But for now, let's talk about the latest news and updates in the world of running. We have a bit of a history lesson here, because so much has happened in the last 2 weeks that the last time we shared any news and updates with you, that it was going to feel almost like, wow, that didn't happen like a long time ago? No, that just happened. And it is all fascinating and incredible. So I don't know how you want to do this, Andy. I was going to do most recent first.
Okay, I like it.
Or should we go backwards and go?
I feel like we're eager to share U.S. Indoor Champs, since that's the most fresh for us.
All right, most recent first it is. So the United States Indoor Track and Field Championships were on February 20-something and 20-something, 22 and 23. What are the dates here? They were on the weekend that are as closest to the dates I just mentioned. And most people didn't know about it, because that's how it goes.
But it was on Peacock.
It was,
so
actually.
it was
NBC
accessible to
streaming
be, to watch.
Only day 2. Remember?
Oh, right.
Day one was pay-per-view.
Yeah.
How bad does it get, right? The national championships won't even be streamed on major networks because nobody watches it, which is
it was
chicken and egg, I guess.
I thought it was great, so
we did watch.
But I always love track.
True.
I'm biased.
So the indoor championships is always a lesser of the running scene because it's just not a premium experience. You don't get all of the events. It's like a kind of condensed meet. You get a lot of the headliners, the top tier competitors that just don't
Except for you don't get Cooper tier, even though you might get.
Okay. You don't get
Sorry, trying to make a pun out of that one.
You don't get top tier runners like Cooper tier, because he skipped out on it. Because it's just not as high a priority. Their athletic contracts, generally bonus money is lower for indoor championships than it is for outdoor championships. So like it's a whole big thing, and I don't know what the answer is, except that That's just how it goes. So indoor track and field tends to surprise us. Like, oh, hey, there was a championship. Let's find out about it. We got to watch day 2, and it was interesting and exciting. We've got some news there for you and share some of the results from day 1. So what we're going to do is we're just going to highlight some of the kind of key moments rather than go event by event. So first, Hobbs Kessler. He won them all. So there aren't...
He doubled.
Yes. There aren't distance events per se. If you call the 3,000 meters a distance event, you're going to have a whole lot of people argue with you about how it's really more of a middle distance event.
But it's one of the longer races you can do indoors.
Is the longest you can do at the U.S. Championships.
For the championship, yeah.
Yeah, so they don't do
5,000.
right. They don't do a 5,000 at the championship level indoors, although many meets will still run it. But Hobbs Kessler ran the 3,000 and 1,500 double. Those are the distance. That's the distance double, if they were to call it that, in the indoors. They're on separate days, so it's not terribly difficult to do both. And he won them both. But not only did he do that, these are actually his first 2 titles. So if I were to have done this in a more dramatic fashion, I would have said he won his first ever U.S. title in the 3,000 meters on day 1 when he outkicked Dylan Jacobs from On Athletics Club in a very, very close finish. So Kessler essentially dove across the line. He actually did. He fell across the line and very nearly did not win the race. But he won it. And then he won his second title the very next day in the 1,500, which was a little bit more of a decisive victory. So there you have it. Kessler did well.
And that's a story of dominance. And this is also a story of dominance. Nikki Hiltz, no stranger to U.S. Championship racing, took the double, just like Kessler, in the 3,000 and the 1,500 meter run.
And that, again, not surprising because Hiltz has, first of all, performed well indoors, historically, but also has begun to perform well at all levels. And what Hiltz does best is final kicks in races. And so, for some reason, the field of runners don't seem to understand how best to run against these kickers like Hiltz, because it's like everyone always thinks that they've got the best kick, and yet, of course, only one person actually is going to have the best kick. And so if you're in a race with Cole Hocker, don't leave it to the last 200 because he technically has the fastest last 300 meters of all time in the mile, if you look at the splits of fastest. So I don't know if it's the fastest or second fastest. Same goes with Hiltz. Hiltz, if in the race late, is almost always going to be able to very nearly win or win. There's only been a few instances where that has not been the case. Mm-hmm. And so, to her credit, Shelby Houlihan tried not to allow that to happen in the 3,000. Remember Shelby Houlihan?
Shelby Houlihan, first U.S. championship, and she was giving Hiltz a run, and still Hiltz outkicked Houlihan, even though Houlihan has been doing really well in the last couple meets that you would have expected that maybe Shelby would have won in the 3,000, but Hiltz was stronger.
Yeah, and Houlihan pressed late. Hiltz just followed right behind her and was able to then outkick in the end. So that happened on day 1, and then day 2, the women's 1,500 was kind of just pedestrian. They didn't really try to go very fast, and as a consequence, it was just this big bunch of people who were all kind of waiting to see who was going to kick in the end. And is it Heather McLean? Mm-hmm. McLean was the first to try herself against the field and did nearly make it work, but she ended up not having quite the final 100, and Hiltz took the race. So there you go. Hiltz with the double, Kessler with the double, and then all that's left are the 800s. And that was actually another interesting story. Remember Josh Hoey from this indoor season?
I do. How can you forget him? He's not going to allow himself to be forgotten.
This indoor season, Josh Hoey went from being a reasonably good 800-meter runner who was not likely to be in anyone's top picks for championship races to the favorite in one season. And he's the favorite because he set the U.S. record in the 1,000 meters, also the world number 2 fastest time ever. Then he set the U.S. record in the 800 meters and beat Bryce Hoppel, while Hoppel also bested the previous U.S. record in the 800 meters. We're talking about indoor record. Yep. Mm-hmm. So Hoey beat Hoppel and set 2 records, and he beat Grant Fisher in a 1,500, which a lot of people are like, oh, but I'm not really that worried about it. Grant Fisher is not a miler by admission, and so that may be.
But he can run a strong one.
He does have a good.
Yeah.
He is one of those rare sub 4 milers from in high school.
Yeah.
But so Hoey has just been doing the most, and Bryce Hoppel now did not run indoors. Again, remember, a lot of people don't. Now, Hoppel's instance here is not necessarily because he doesn't run indoors, because Hoppel's the defending world indoor champion.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have to run U.S. indoors because he gets a bye to world championships. And so he did not have to compete for a place on the team, which is why Hoppel wasn't there. I'm assuming he's planning to run world championships. I haven't seen anything that suggests otherwise. So Hoey won the title, his first U.S. title on the track, and he also happened to run another U.S. record in the process, besting his own time to run 143.2 indoors on the short track, which is uncanny.
Yeah, I was noticing as we were watching the race and commenting to Zach how he would take the corners kind of wide, and I was like, he's taking the corners kind of wide, but it makes sense because they're so sharp.
And he's running
so you
so
do have
fast.
to be careful. There is some kind of strategy involved for one personally, depending on your center of gravity and your momentum and other factors. You might not be able to hug the corner when you're in an indoor track because it's just so tight.
And you got to be seriously alert because the corners come up quickly too.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times runners almost look like they're surprised by the corner when they first get to it, especially when they're in lane 1, which is so sharp, such a narrow, tight turn. All right. So the men's 800 was exciting for that reason.
The women's 800, I wasn't able to guess who might be the victor because Nia Akins, although an Olympian, she's said that she wanted to take some time to not have as much pressure on herself. And so she wasn't in like prime shape for this indoor season. And it's been kind of a short season, really. There's not been many meets. And so admittedly, she has said that she's not in her best top form. So I didn't think that she was going to win the race, but she did, winning her second indoor title in the event. And ran a personal best of 159. Sub 2 indoors is really good. I know in outdoor we hear a lot of sub 2s. Indoor, it is not as likely that you're going to see that.
True that.
I think for many years, Ajay Wilson was winning them in like 201.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No doubt at all. So there you have it. That was U.S. Indoor Championships, which then now we do have a World Indoor Championships coming up.
In China,
which is, again, much like the national level competition, is not going to be necessarily hyped like outdoor championships is, because similarly you have a whole bunch of people, world-class athletes, who just do not run indoors. As a matter of fact, like whole swaths of the world where they just don't run indoors.
because they don't have indoor tracks in a lot of places in the world.
Access, certainly, but even then, Europe has just decided over the years to not really put too much time and energy into indoor track.
Well, I feel that when we watched Jakob Ingebrigtsen get that world record, that they were hyping it a lot.
Yeah, but that meet is relatively new.
Okay.
It's only been going
See,
on
that's
for a
what I'm
couple
saying.
of
Like,
years.
I think maybe it's on the trend up.
Well, it is. It has to be because World Athletics is making it be. They're instituting another level of classification to have more indoor track meets in other places. But historically, people have actually come to the United States to run fast indoor times because there's just not that many other indoor track meets around the world. And so access, as Andy said, has been an issue. And that's fine because indoor is only it's only one piece of the track and field scene.
And if you love track and you love watching track and you get hyped for the outdoor stuff, watch the indoor stuff because it matters. The more people who are watching, the more they're able to put advertising dollars back into the funnel and into the system. And so the more the running community embraces these events, the better the sport is going to do.
You're not going to convince people
to watch indoor
track.
I don't know.
Watch track
I've been loving this indoor season
because of things like this.
Yes. Okay, go ahead. That's a great transition.
Because on February 14th, a week before the U.S. Championships, Grant Fisher basically firmly pronounced with absolute clarity that he is the king of the short track globally. And it's just really quite something to see this. So you recall Fisher, along with Cole Hocker, broke the 3,000 meters indoor or short track world record. Both of them together. Fisher won the race, so he gets the record. Well, not long after that, he did it again at Boston once more, running the 5,000 meter world record for short track in 12:44:09. But here's what's crazy. Not just the short track world record, but also that was a personal best for Grant Fisher, who holds the outdoor United States record, which means it's an overall U.S. record. Now, they don't classify them this way, so he's not going to get the outdoor track and field record for this performance because they are separate classifications. But there's now an asterisk next to his outdoor record, which says, while this is the outdoor record, there's also a faster time that's been run in the 5,000 meters, and that's because Grant Fisher's amazing. So he does this. Now holds 2 world records. Grant Fisher holds 2 world records. He also holds 2 Olympic medals, and he has every U.S. record from 3,000 to 10,000 meters, indoors and outdoors. Maybe he doesn't have the 2 mile anymore. I can't remember what happened with the 2 mile. But anyway, I'm not going to worry about that. Is there any doubt left that Grant Fisher is the greatest American distance runner? Is there any doubt left?
There shouldn't be. But the thing is, it's so interesting. He does not get as much of the hype.
I know, and I
like Galen
I know
Rupp
why.
when he was breaking records was getting like lots of hype.
I know why though. I know why.
Why?
One, because Grant Fisher is very quiet, and which is true with Galen Rupp as well. And so it wasn't Rupp's like flamboyance or anything because he's not. But also Rupp was running with that Salazar group, which was very PR minded. They were deliberate about. They created a kind of culture around their team, and there were some negative stigmas within that, yes, for good reason at times, but in principle Fisher has just been a kind of behind the scenes character by design. And so he ran with Bowerman Track Club, but at the same time they just didn't spend a lot of time talking about him, even when they were talking about Bowerman Track Club, and yet quietly has become the greatest of them all. And okay, so people are going to say, yeah, but it's a super shoe era, and you can't, there's guys that have done great things in the past too. But here's the thing. It is the super shoe era. So the fast times could be, you could say, qualified by that statement. But everybody else in the U.S. right now is wearing those shoes, and they're not running as fast as Fisher.
Right.
And everybody else in the world is wearing those shoes, and Grant Fisher's still a 2-time Olympic medalist in the same games, which when was the last American to medal in multiple distance Olympic events? I'm talking distance events. The answer is you gotta go all the way back. It just is, that is uncanny capacity. So he is running against the very best runners in the history of time, and he's doing supremely well against them.
And now has 2 world records.
And now has 2 world records to boot. By the way, Jimmy Gressier was in the race as well of France and ran a new French indoor or short track record in 12:54.
And he hung on
for about half.
For half.
Yep.
Which was as much help as Fisher got. Fisher ran that super fast time solo, essentially.
And having to lap people.
Yeah.
Who weren't getting out of his way.
Inside and outside, so that's a little confusing and dicey.
Yeah. This is another testament to Fisher and his capacity to just be aware in the midst of what he's doing. Because he had to do some pretty
navigate. There's like a clump of guys at one point that he had to navigate around.
Yeah. So pretty awesome stuff. Props to Grant Fisher. He is the king.
He's the king.
It's settled. Don't deny it. All right. Well, that's not the only world record that went down that weekend. Although this one not on the track, but instead on the roads.
February 15th, Jacob Kiplimo reclaimed his world record in the half marathon. You'll remember that Yoav Kejelcha, he recently beat his time, so they've gone back and forth. Kiplimo now crushed the record.
So this is an interesting one. First, you have to understand the progression because Kibiwott Candy of Kenya broke the world record in the half marathon in 2020, and when he broke it by almost 30 seconds, by just under 30 seconds. It was like 24 seconds, which is big. Before that, no one had ever run under 58 minutes. Kibiwott Candy ran 57:37 or so, or 32, or whatever it was, 57:30 something low, and that was quite substantial. Kiplimo then broke Candy's record by 1 second, and then a couple years later, Kejelcha broke Kiplimo's record by 1 second, which was this past fall. Now Kiplimo retook the record by 48 seconds.
So much time.
Now,
Insane.
You're going to say, wow, that's pretty impressive. Not just how impressive. The last time the world half marathon record was broken by that much time was in the 1970s. It's been 50 years since anyone took that much time off the record.
Wow.
So, because we do our due diligence with these things and we are not singling any particular people out, that raises a lot of eyebrows. And there's a whole lot of people now saying that can't be legitimate. There's got to be some question raised about, is he doing something that he shouldn't be doing? Was there something wrong with the race course? Like, was it mismanaged in some capacity so that it was not fully true and accurate? Now, they did remeasure. They always do when someone breaks records. And so far, there's not been anything that I've seen about that.
The one thing that has been discussed, and I think it's a really valid conversation, is that because of the super shoes and that returned energy, people are able to run closer to what their 10K capacity is for longer. And so the gap has been narrowing and narrowing to like that maximum speed for like a 10K that they can prolong. So that's
Kiplimo
the other
ran almost his 10K PR.
Yeah.
In the middle 10K of this race.
Yeah.
26:30s was his middle 10K. Now, yes, that is true. And there's some question around the super shoes don't just allow for performance, but you can also do things in training. And so we see these times coming down in part because people like Kiplimo could, if he was training in super shoes in certain instances, he could be running longer periods of time at his lactate threshold, just hammering that over and over and recovering faster. And so then it's like, okay, well, that has benefits potentially. So there's all these questions, but I think the other side of the argument is important to acknowledge here, which is this is also not surprising that Kiplimo did this because Kiplimo is by far the greatest half marathoner in the history of time. He owns 3 of the top 5 fastest half marathon performances ever. 3 of them. And he owns 5 of the top 16 fastest half marathon times ever. And so there's never been someone who has consistently as he has run as fast as he has. He's run under 58 minutes 3 different times.
right.
The only person who's ever done that.
He's not someone that was like off the radar, that jumped on the radar.
Yep. Yeah, so what was the world record 5 years ago, he's done better than that on 3 separate occasions. I mean, it's just like clearly this guy knows the half marathon. So you can wonder, and people will always wonder in these situations. But evidence suggests that this is an uncanny level of performance, all the same.
Right.
And how incredible, if it were in fact truly legitimate, how incredible a performance. So we wonder, but we also celebrate it because it was pretty cool. Okay. Let's just do a quick couple highlights because there are
Very
so
briefly.
many. Yes, there are so many other things happening. In the NCAA, Silan Ayildiz of Oregon set a new mile collegiate record in 4:23. That was Caitlin Tui's record, which
So
she
the
bested.
Women's record.
Yes, thank you. And she is Turkish, in fact, running for Oregon. And I believe has been essentially a professional runner in the past. And so it's kind of an interesting situation. Not particularly sure why she is now in the collegiate setting. She's going to Oregon for some reason, obviously.
School, likely.
Right, that's what I mean. But I don't know particularly what she's
Yeah.
what her intent is, what she's working toward. But she clearly has been performing well because she also anchored Oregon's DMR team to a collegiate DMR national record.
I would use her
record.
too.
No doubt about it. So she
close
knows
it out.
what she's doing, at least in the mile.
4:23. Snap
Yeah.
diggity, that's fast.
But it also should be known that 7 of the top 10 NCAA women's mile times have come in the year 2025, which is only a couple of months old. And
Right.
so this is the year for NCAA women's times to just be slashed and smashed. It's going to happen. Another sub-4 high schooler, and a matter of fact, 3 of them happened in the last 2 weeks. Owen Powell ran sub 4 for the first time in a time of 3:57. That's the 24th high schooler to do it. And then a week later, he ran sub 4 again, a full second faster to break the U.S. high school indoor mile record.
Wow.
Which is pretty impressive.
I think it's crazy how he went from not having broken 4 to running 3:57.
And then 3:56.
Right? And then 3:56. I'm just saying, like, that was a big jump. That's what they call a breakthrough.
But he was pretty close to it multiple times.
Sure.
Multiple times. So there is that too. By the way, so I mentioned 24. There's now 26 because 2 more did it the next week. And they, by the way, are high school teammates. The first ever high school teammates to run sub 4, like at the same in the same season as
cute.
Teammates. And they did it in the same race.
That's fun.
Which is further incredible. And they're also friends with this guy, Owen Powell. As a matter of fact, one of them is going to be rooming with Owen Powell next year in college. And so it's just like, these fast kids doing fast things together.
Was it you that was telling me about that research about when you are around high performers, you usually have like a 30% higher?
I don't know what the percent is, but yeah. Your testosterone, not production, but like reuptake, I can't remember what the phrase is, increases when you see someone perform well with whom you identify socially in some capacity. Like, that's my teammate, great job, they do well. It actually makes me have higher performance potential, which they did because Owen Powell ran his time, and then the other 2 ran their sub 4 times in the next heat.
Cool.
So there you go. Really exciting stuff. I just want to give you a quick history of the boys sub 4 mile. This is a very, very quick history. But the first 3 to do it did so in the 1960s. That was the Jim Ryan era.
Oh, yeah.
Marty
Jim Ryan.
LaCory was in there. Yeah, good days. And that's pretty awesome. Jim Ryan did it several times. He was a phenom. So after that, in the 1960s, it was not until the year 2001 that another U.S. high schooler ran sub 4.
Wow.
So 30 some years. And so that's insane. Like, that was a huge stretch of time. And then after 2001, it wasn't until 2011 when the next one did it. And then after that, from 2015 on, it just got crazy. And 21 of those 26 to have done so were just from the last 10 years.
Wow.
So that's really something.
It is something.
How about Nico Young? He ran 3:50 in the mile, which is a big PR for him, and just looks really good because, remember, Nico Young as an Olympian also had set multiple collegiate national records before graduating and going pro, and now he's just demonstrating that he continues to improve.
And become an Olympian. Did you say that part?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
He is going to be a real threat. We talk about Grant Fisher. Nico Young's not that far behind Fisher in terms of performances, so that's pretty exciting. Juliet Whitaker also has set herself up for some serious upcoming performance. She ran the NCAA fastest time, 1:59 and change. So you mentioned Nia Akins running 1:59. Juliet Whitaker, as a collegian, is doing the same thing. And we've seen her perform well at the U.S. level also. And so it's important to watch her because she's continuing to improve.
But hers was not on an official short track. It was an oversized indoor track.
Yeah, it was. Okay. We should just quick summarize, as reported by Let's Run so far in this indoor track season, from December until now, we have seen 8, maybe 9 now, NCAA records, 8 American records, and 5 world records in events between 800 and 5,000 meters.
Wow.
And that is only in a few months span. So, like, something's in the water this year.
Woo.
And I am just looking forward to seeing how the summer track season goes, because if this keeps up, it's just going to be another fun one.
I'm excited, too. But I'm also excited for the indoor championships.
Yeah, indoor's not done yet. We don't need to look ahead to outdoor yet, because indoor world championships is coming soon, and we're going to be sharing those results with you as well.
Thank you all so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next week.